This is the JE Podcast, brought to you by the Philadelphia Jewish Exponent and its parent company, Mid-Atlantic Media. This episode originated from the Philadelphia Jewish Exponent's sister publication, the Washington Jewish Week.
Welcome to the WJW Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Trudler, editor of the Washington Jewish Week. I'm joined today by Natan Sharansky, a leader in the effort for the right of Soviet Jews to immigrate to Israel. Natan was a political prisoner in the Soviet Union and was sentenced to 13 years in prison, including solitary confinement and hard labor. After serving 9 years in prison, due to an incredible worldwide advocacy effort that was led by his wife Avital, Natan was released, and he and Avital moved to Israel in 1986. Natan is a former member of the Knesset, having served in 4 consecutive Israeli governments as a minister and a deputy prime minister. A former chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel, Natan is the recipient of the Israel Prize, which he won in 2018. It's Israel's highest award. Natan is also the recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In fact, Natan is the only living non-American citizen to have won both of those very prestigious awards. In 2019, Natan became chair of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Natan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you.
I mentioned before, Natan, that you were a political prisoner for 9 years. And I'm curious how your personal experience during that time of your life impacts your assessment of the current plight of the hostages that are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. And specifically, I'm wondering, how important is it that the hostages are brought home as soon as possible? And how important are the advocacy efforts that we're seeing from the hostages' families?
Every experience is unique in its own way, so it's difficult to make comparisons sometimes. But a couple of things are clear. First of all, they're in an extremely hard situation, under pressure that any moment there can happen anything with you. Probably it's even harder than the situation when I was in prison. And because in fact there are not only no laws, in Soviet Union there was also no laws, but very limited opportunities for the public opinion of the world to press. Hamas really doesn't care. And what is similar, I think, for me it was very important to feel there is meaning in fact, the fact that you're sitting in the prison, because that would puts you in the middle of the historic struggle where everything what you do is maybe even more important than before. And it is very important to feel that your country, your people, all the world of good-willing people believing in freedom, they're with you in the struggle. And I had to make myself every moment to think, instead of listening to KGB, to think, to imagine what the Jewish world, what my people, what my wife are doing at this moment. And that's what gives you strength. So I do hope that our hostages feel how all the countries fighting for them. And when I hear again and again warning that when we are attacking Hamas, it's dangerous for our hostages, but also I believe that when they hear a lot of the attacks, of the fighting and so on, it reminds them that the world in Israel special that didn't forget them. The second thing, of course, the families are fighting, and they are guided by their feelings, the feeling of the love, of the bond, and so. But our leaders have also to have full sympathy and solidarity, to mobilize all the world against Hamas, but at the same time, they have to think about the survival of the country as a whole. So I never was or thinking that my release should be got by any price. And that's why, yeah, we have this very difficult dilemma, and our leaders have to decide what decisions it is possible to take for the sake of release of the hostages, and what decisions will endanger the future existence of the state of Israel. So there are limits which they can afford. So that is a very difficult situation, but we have no choice. We have to fight for both, for survival of the state of Israel, what means defeating of Hamas, and for bringing our brothers and sisters back.
Natan, you've spent a good portion of your life working to help strengthen the connection of Jews to the land of Israel, and you've been a very big proponent of Aliyah, of people immigrating to Israel. I'm wondering, in light of the horrific attacks on October 7th and Israel's ongoing military operation, do you think that might impact the desire of Jews in the diaspora to make Aliyah?
First of all, I want to make my views on Aliyah clear. I believe that by far the best place for a Jew who wants to enjoy freedom and living as a Jew full life, Israel, by far is the best place. But I also believe that you cannot make people to make Aliyah by becoming the commissar of Zionism and pushing people to come. Well, we have to save Jews from all the places where they are in danger, but we have to encourage Jews, they'll make Aliyah because they want that quality of life, of Jewish life, which Israel can give and other places cannot. I always was, but I was the member of the government, the head of Jewish agency. I was against trying to say that you have to make Aliyah because of anti-Semitism, because of danger for you. If Israel is only shelter, there are probably also safe shelters in some other islands or whatever places in the world. But I have to say that all my philosophy and theory and so on is now at risk, because it seems that there is no shelter for Jews. Again, I'd like them to come here because they choose to do it. But at the same time, and by the way, I think if somebody is looking for shelter, Israel, as it was shown just now, is also not an ideal shelter. It's ideal shelter if you're looking for the spiritual protection of your Jewishness. But physically, we still have to fight for our right to exist against our enemies. But yeah, what is interesting, the moment Israel is attacked, Israel looks to our enemies weaker, anti-Semitism rises simultaneously all over the world. So if this situation, this new situation showed to us Israelis how strong is our society. We looked like the most divided society in the world. In one day, we became like the most united. And all our debates of the yesterday look like absolutely meaningless. But I think the world jury also discovered that anti-Semitism, even in the countries like the United States of America, anti-Semitism is not something belonging to the museum. It's not something that you have to express your solidarity with Jews of Soviet Union, which something which exists in your own home. And if before I had to build all types of 3D principles and others to explain to people how hatred towards Israel is connected with the hatred of Jews. Today, you don't need you don't need any formulas to prove it. It's so obvious. That is the biggest pogrom in the modern history, and the reaction of many intellectuals is that that's the beginning of liberation. So their hatred towards Israel makes them blind towards the results of this awful, the most sadistic, the most awful massacre of Jews. So yes, well, I think that's the moment when not only Israeli society is going through this feeling of togetherness, one family. I think all the world Jewry has to feel how strongly we are connected by the hatred of our enemies and by solidarity, by the feeling of solidarity and responsibility for one another.
Thank you, Natan. You just touched on anti-Semitism a little bit. You are well known and well regarded as a champion of human rights, and you've been vocal, very vocal, about the need to combat anti-Semitism. And as you just alluded to, anti-Semitism is increasing on a global scale. And I'm wondering, what do you think the Jewish community can do as a people to better combat this bigotry that we face? And what role do you think the international community has in terms of fighting anti-Semitism and partnering with the Jewish community in the fight against Jew hatred?
As to Jews, look, one of the problems which I faced in the last 20 years was that there are, on one hand, increasing attacks on Israel and bordering anti-Semitism, and very often turning into anti-Semitism. And that's why 20 years ago I proposed to see demonization of Israel, the legitimization of Israel, double standard, 3D principle as the anti-Semitism. But there were an increasing number of Jews who felt that if only Israel would behave differently, if only Israel would not irritate so many people, we Jews could feel ourselves much safer. And even in the last couple of years, I heard more and more voices from some that probably we have to start thinking about strengthening our identity without connection to Israel. After all, as one woman told me, for thousands of years, Jewish identity was not connected to Israel. So why should we now connect it to Israel and pay all the negative price? And the young people, as a result, don't want to be associated with their own people and so on. All this nonsense, I think now disappears. It doesn't matter how you feel connected or not. The world knows that you are connected, and weak Israel means bigger, growing anti-Semitism. The Israel which is secure and what encourages respect from our enemies. At the same time, it strengthens situation with Jews. And the other thing, which I think my numerous Jewish liberal friends have to understand, and almost every Jew believes or considers himself or herself liberal, and I also consider myself liberal, but it was broadly accepted that progressive is a natural part of liberal. And maybe we don't agree with many things that progressive organizations say, but after all, the ideal is like ours, tikkun olam. After all, that's what they want. We not always agree with the methods, but the idea. And so when they're marching for the freedom of women, we have to join them, even if the leaders of this march hate Israel. But after all, the human rights cause is so important. And in many other things, for liberal Jews, it was absolutely natural to see progressive movement, woke movement, as their natural partners. And as I wrote in my article in Tablet some time ago, it was proved to be false partners, because these neo-Marxist philosophies, they're dividing all the world into oppressors and oppressed. And the oppressed are always right, and the oppressors are always wrong. That's typical Marxism of my childhood. And Israel, of course, and the Jews always belong to oppressors, or at least to successful white males. And so they're on the wrong side of history. And that's why they can, even when they see this most awful pogrom in the modern history, Some of them say that that is the liberation. Some of them don't say that that's liberation, but they definitely feel that they should not be in a hurry to criticize it, because after all, it is those who are making all these atrocities, they are among the oppressed. They're on the right side of history. And those whom they are raping and killing, they are oppressors. They are on the wrong side of history. They are connected to Zionists, to settlers. So how we can express our sympathy? To the contrary, at the same time, they're participating in the most anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic demonstrations. So people can listen to the course of microaggression, or lecturer can give the course on microaggression, then send his students to participate in the demonstration from the river to the sea. So that had, I hope, finally shows that in order to be a liberal Jew and to fight for tikkun olam, for human rights, you don't have to look for the false partners who in the moment of truth will not be with you. We Jews have such a broad, deep, passionate history of fighting for human rights. So we have to fight for human rights with as we did it with Martin Luther King, not with Black Lives Matter. So that's, I think, that's like immediate conclusions, which I would think that we Jews have to do. We have to look for our real partners. And here a word about attitude towards anti-Semitism of the broader world. Anti-Semitism always begins with Jews, but it never finishes there. That's what I think Elie Wiesel was saying. We have to say that anti-Semitism means that something is rotten in the society. It's like warning to the society that hatred is coming to on the surface. Hatred is threatening to your society. It will turn it in parts. And that's why people have to be concerned, not only because of their solidarity and sympathy to Jews. We were speaking about those who don't feel solidarity. Thank God there are so many people in the world who not only are shocked by this awful pogrom, but understand that Israel, that they have to give to Israel to fight against this awful enemy and even to help. But it's not only concern about Jews. People have to be concerned about their own society, about the future of Europe, about the future of America. And so there are a lot of partners who have to be mobilized and to fight together with us in this struggle.
Okay, and just one final question, Natan. You touched on the 3Ds, which you introduced 20 years ago to help define anti-Semitism and distinguish legitimate criticism of Israel from anti-Semitism. It's demonization, as you mentioned, double standards, and delegitimization. And now, 2 decades later, the 3Ds are still very present and very pertinent. Israel is still being demonized. Very often its actions are blown out of proportion. The double standards, it's still being held to a double standard, whether it's by the UN or others. And in terms of delegitimization, Israel's fundamental right to exist is still very much questioned by far too many. Do you think we can get to a point where the 3Ds become a thing of the past? Is that even possible? And how would we get there?
So it's like the question, if we will reach the point that anti-Semitism will belong to the past. In fact, at some moment, frankly, when I was dissident in the Soviet Union, I believed, and it was like this in the Soviet Union, that anti-Semitism was very closely connected to the totalitarian nature of the regime. But as we saw, it emerges in the free world, which is not totalitarian, though philosophies which are connected or which are inspiring, supporting anti-Semitism, they are, as a rule, totalitarian theories. All these woke theories, they are totalitarian by its nature. But as we saw during 3,000 years, anti-Semitism is not disappearing. Probably there is something, as I think Jean-Paul Sartre said that for anti-Semite, Jew is the closest to Satan. So people need the Satan. People need the other whom they can hate. And what to do in Europe for thousands of years, the other was Jew, and in the other places also. So exactly as anti-Semitism always exists, and our aim must be not to make anti-Semitism disappear, to make anti-Semitism not dangerous to us, that it cannot attack us, it cannot harm us, and that is possible, that is reachable, because the state of Israel is one of the most powerful answers to the anti-Semites. I suspect that something like this will be also with the state of Israel. I think it can get, and it is getting, a lot of respect, a lot of a lot of acceptance, understanding of its importance, sometimes admiration. Still, there will be always forces who hate us as a state. And what our task is to make these forces as weak as possible and not to let them to destroy us or to harm us.
Natan Sharansky, thank you again for taking the time to chat, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.